Sailor's never lost a war. He never quits. You fight Sador, and you've got a snowball's chance in hell.
Snowball?
Another low-budget film made to chase the massive interest in space adventure films after that one film did really well. You know the one. This one is polarizing. People either seem to dig it or really hate it. Making a big space fantasy adventure but on a tiny budget doesn't seem like a great idea.
He's completely outmatched. You must know that.
Oh,
We are all going to be killed.
Battle Beyond the Stars.
I'm from Earth. Know where that is?
I was born in space.
Oh.
Battle Beyond the Stars was a low-budget B-movie remake of The Magnificent Seven, which itself was an American remake of Akira Kurosawa's The Seven Samurai. Battle Beyond the Stars is not in the same league as either of those films, but it does have some charms of its own. B-movies. We don't really talk about B-movies so much in the way that we once did. They started out as the second movie in a double bill, but quickly acquired a reputation for being cheap and cheesy. Studios made B-movies for a while, but then so did a lot of smaller independent outfits who would flourish making cheaper fare that was often seen as not really that good, with lower production values, variable acting, that sort of thing. Eventually there was a market for exploitation films, schlock, grindhouse, stuff that the studios weren't making. And of course this was all made on a budget that wouldn't have even paid for a horse on Bonanza. Or Hoss. Or Hoss's horse. Or Hoss's horse's handler on Bonanza.
Is that possible?
For decades, producer Roger Corman was the king of B-movies. He directed dozens of low-budget movies and produced dozens more before starting his own operation, New World. Throughout the 70s he produced films filled with horror, grindhouse grit, titillating exploitation, and a lot of action. The main thought was to get people to buy tickets in smaller theatres and drive-ins, and by the 80s, video rental and cable television.
We'll be getting a picture soon.
He'd also distribute many highbrow European films in the US, not for the money, but because he personally liked those sorts of films. He and wife Julie would together produce hundreds of movies, most of which turned a profit. Every now and then, Corman would try to make his own worthy film. And when that didn't make as much money as his usual fare, women in prisons, car chases, serial killers, he went back to the women in prison, serial killers and car chasers since they were so much kinder to him than the film critics. Corman had given big breaks to filmmakers like Francis Ford Coppola, Ron Howard, Martin Scorsese, Dennis Hopper, Jonathan Demme, Robert Towne, Joe Dante, David Carradine, Jack Nicholson, just to name a few. A litany of actors and filmmakers got their start in a Corman film, while television actors often got a shot at a feature film thanks to Roger Corman. One of those TV stars was Richard Thomas, who'd become a huge small screen star after spending a big chunk of the 70s as John Walton Jr. in the television series The Waltons, where his character was mostly known by a particular nickname, which I'm not going to mention. A popular catchphrase emerged from the Waltons after a valediction given to John Walton Jr. using the aforementioned nickname. Now I could probably do an entire video just by name dropping that catchphrase from the Waltons. I could, but I won't. It's just too obvious to say that catchphrase over and over again, but it's something along the lines of "Sleep tight, John Walton Jr." Even after Richard Thomas left the series and the character of John Walton Jr. was recast, he would forever be associated with the Waltons.
You're all talking about me as if I suddenly turned into a different person, and you're making me very nervous.
Of course, he did many other roles, like a television version of All Quiet on the Western Front, and of course, Battle Beyond the Stars, where his character was called Shad. Look, I don't know, but Goodnight Shad just doesn't seem to have the same zing. For years, the major studios had occasionally dabbled in medium or large budget horror or science fiction films, but more often than not, the genre was littered with B pictures.
All of our wealth is in our culture.
Corman had made a mint from B pictures, but by the end of the 70s, the studios had embraced many of the high concepts that you would usually only see at the drive-ins. Movies like Jaws, Halloween and Star Wars. If you cut the budgets and added more nudity, then you had a Roger Corman film. So, when you can't join them, beat them. But when they join you and they beat you, you join them back and try to beat them at their own game of your game. Look, I'm sure that made sense when I started this, but anyway. Star Wars hit big in 1977, and like a great number of science fiction films made in the first few years after Star Wars' release, Battle Beyond the Stars was a project that hoped to cash in on the trend.
Nobody could be that stupid.
Corman had already taken over the US distribution of an Italian-made science fiction film, Star Crash, but he also saw enough of a trend to make his own film. Unlike some of the other low-budget efforts released in the late 70s, and we are talking about you, H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come.
I don't feel anything.
Battle Beyond the Stars did actually seem like the people making it were loving the chance to make a space adventure film.
There are hundreds of thousands like us at home.
It cost peanuts, looks like hazelnuts, made cashews at the box office. Well, stale cashews. But stale cashews was how Corman built a mini empire.
I think it's your torque bar.
My what?
Battle Beyond the Stars is a film that stars a lot of people you'll know from something else. Something better. The film is about a hero, Shad,
You're a boy.
who volunteers to collect an army to fight for his home planet Ikea. The evil leader of the mutants of the Malmori Empire, Sador, threatens you with his ultimate weapon to conquer, well, what have you got?
I possess a stellar converter.
Well, look, it destroys things, and if the Ikea don't submit to his huge, very big, massive weapon, then they're going to find out firsthand what a char-grilled sausage feels like. Shad is given a ship by his mentor Zed, who was once a famous fighter and now records personalised messages on Cameo dressed as Moses. The ship has a sassy AI, Nell. And well, it's certainly got a unique design, a fallopian-class vessel if I'm not mistaken. And for reasons, it has boobs. Shad's job is to assemble an army of mercenaries to help Ikea defeat Sador, so it's very convenient that every single person he meets is going to help him, because the lack of time wasters really does help this film fly by.
Station of Dr. Hephaestus, Shad. There, dead ahead.
Dr. Hephaestus seems to be, well, a shadow of his former self, not the man he once was, taking dieting too far, etc. He invents weapons, but he's also not going to help Shad. Though he does think Shad would be good for his daughter, Nanelia. But Shad has his whole, I've got to save my home planet thing, so he's got to deal with that first. Shad and Nanelia both escape in their own ships. Shad gets his first taste of battle in dealing with some raiders trying to steal a cargo from a freighter crewed by a guy called Cowboy.
Help!
The raiders are space jackers. Space jackers. How they have time to steal anybody's cargo is anybody's guess. Shad's sales pitch is direct and to the point, but it's unlikely to recruit anybody outside of a concussion ward.
We'll need experienced soldiers. Would you care to fight with us?
Cowboy himself seems not too keen to sign up for a war, but since the people whose cargo he's carrying won't be needing all these weapons, he offers them to Shad. Which is a nice gesture. I mean, he did save his life. But it's also pretty good for Cowboy, because if he tried to return the weapons, he'd likely get hit with the bullshit restocking fee. Nanelia, meanwhile, has been captured by the lizard-like Cayman, who's going to sell her. But one mention of Sador has him cutting her free and joining the cause.
Sador!
What a stroke of luck. Shad encounters Nestor, a group of aliens who are all linked. What one experiences, they all experience. Which is handy since it makes clothes shopping very easy. They only have to buy one movie ticket, and sharing the same Netflix password's no problem. But the downside is it makes organising a surprise party that bit more difficult.
In a manner of speaking.
Shad's vessel is buzzed by Saint Xman, a Valkyrie warrior in a super fast and agile ship. And despite Shad being bemused by her need to prove herself in battle, she joins the group.
My planet is in danger, and you're playing tag with me. Your ship is like a toy. You have no firepower.
It is one of the fastest in the universe.
Then there's Gelt, a mercenary who, despite all of his fabulous wealth, has run out of places to hide, and so the idea of being able to live on Ikea is all he needs to join the cause.
What else would I kill for?
Pleasure?
It's strictly business with me.
They all assemble on Ikea, as in Akira Kurosawa. They prepare themselves for battle in various ways, which for Cowboy seems to be getting quietly liquored up. Or at least I sure hope that's liquor.
Move it! Kick ass, boys! Kick ass!
There's a big ground battle where the locals take on the Malmori troops, where Cowboy, leads the charge. Then we take to the skies, where one by one our heroes fall in a heroic sacrifice.
He didn't want to fight, but he came anyway.
Sador is finally defeated by Shad and Nanelia. Just.
I want to live forever!
Then Shad gives a speech to his new girlfriend that basically hand waves away all of this death with some Ikea spirituality, and that's it.
I've got some more surprises for any visitors.
What drink is that?
Scotch and soda.
Here is a film that now I have seen all of twice. Once when it came out on home video, and once now for this review. Back in the day, I did not click with this movie at all and had no desire to ever rewatch it. As I'm watching a lot of these films, sometimes for the first time and sometimes for the first time as an adult or for a very long time, it's interesting to see which of these films that were made in an age of a science fiction gold rush that did more than the bare minimum.
You're clones.
I mean, we've seen medium and big budget spacey films that were most likely greenlit because of Star Wars, Star Trek the Motion Picture, Moonraker, The Black Hole. We've seen smaller films from independent producers like H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come, which are now considered to be the low watermark of such films. When you see Battle Beyond the Stars, it's proudly a B movie. Put it up against The Shape of Things to Come, and you can just see how much putting some effort into it really does bring it alive.
7 ships. 7. What do you think we should do? Run away? Good idea.
Jimmy T. Murakami was mostly known as an animator. He would later give us the heartbreaking film version of When the Wind Blows. This was his only live-action production, with a little bit of help from Roger Corman. Screenwriter John Sayles would later write and direct his own projects while working on genre fare or as a script doctor for major studio productions. James Cameron was hired in an entry-level position in the movie's effects department, where he volunteered to design the hero ship piloted by Shad. James Cameron asked himself, what would make this a ship in a Roger Corman film? So, how about a ship with breasts? Cameron would progress quickly through the ranks to end up as the movie's art director, responsible for the look of the sets and the special effects. He also met Corman's assistant, Gail Ann Hurd, with whom he'd later partner up on films like The Terminator, and they'd be married for a time. Cameron would also meet actor Bill Paxton on this film, where Paxton was working not as an actor, but on the crew building and painting the sets. But the actual cast was stacked. Julia Duffy as Shad's sister, John Saxon as Sador, a John Saxony role if there ever was a deadpan villain.
Not a trace of them left. Not even their dust.
Getting a big chunk of the film's budget was George Peppard as Cowboy, who probably gives the nicest, most human performance of the film.
You're just lucky I haven't got any ammunition left.
Robert Vaughn also appears in a very controlled stint as Gelt.
What's your pitch?
Earl Boen was the main Nestor, Sybil Danning in a role that I don't know anyone else could pull off, a walking Frazetta painting.
Stick with me. You'll get an education.
Marta Kristen from Lost in Space has a moment with the doomed cowboy.
I like your company.
Thanks.
Darlanne Fluegel as Nanelia works well enough with Richard Thomas, who's given a number of slightly tongue-in-cheek lines for somebody who the film can't decide if he's either Luke Skywalker or Han Solo.
Whatever.
So why not both?
You're placed under my direct command. You fired without me. That which is not organic must not...
Harm that which is. I know. It's a damn stupid rule.
It is a good cast in a cheap science fiction film, but they're not completely wasted. Hang on, isn't this film crap and cheesy? Oh yeah. It's cheesy, very cheesy on a cheese pizza with extra cheese, hold the sauce, no base. But for what this film was aiming at, a B-movie Star Wars style space adventure, it does the job fairly well.
Hooray for our side!
Corman had bought a disused lumberyard at Venice Beach, which he turned into a studio hub for many of his productions in the 1980s. They'd often have a similar indoor look, mainly down to wholesale recycling of sets. Battle Beyond the Stars cost $2 million in 1980 money, split between Corman and Orion Pictures. It didn't necessarily make a huge amount at the box office compared to studio films, but then it didn't need to. It still brought in, depending on who you ask, or more importantly, who's asking, anywhere between 3 and 5 times its budget, which was fine for a Corman movie. Corman and company would make more sci-fi themed films, but usually with a much smaller scale and a horror focus. Several of his films would also reuse the sets and effects from Battle Beyond the Stars.
Just give us enough time to get clear now, and let him have it.
30 seconds and counting, Zed.
Battle Beyond the Stars has been pinged for being a cheap film and a derivative movie, a rip-off, a clone, a knockoff, a Xerox, a copy and paste, a copy and paste, a copy and paste. Well, duh! It's all of that, but for a change we're going to say, yes, aside from all of that, they did make an entertaining film for less money than I made from selling old magazines to dentists. So I can't hate too much a film where people used to making really cheap horror and action films pulled out a lot of the stops, and a lot of credit has to go to James Cameron, to make something with a bit more ambition, something that is not completely terrible. I mean, you still might hate this, but you also might love this. For my part, it was nowhere near as bad as I was expecting it. Still not amazing, but it's solid, and more importantly, entertaining. If you want a cheesy B movie where it at least looks like they were trying to make something half decent rather than phoning something in. It has a slightly tongue-in-cheek sense of humour in places that elevates it beyond a phoned-in, low-budget science fiction film. Yes, we are talking about H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come again. Battle Beyond the Stars features a score by James Horner, which again punches well above its weight for such a low-budget film. So you've got a movie with George Peppard, Robert Vaughn, John Saxon, effects by James Cameron, score by James Horner, and more importantly, sets painted by Bill Paxton. This is the cinematic equivalent of Cream playing at a school dance.
I'm sorry for the reception you got.
This isn't Dune or Lord of the Rings. It's aiming a lot lower than Star Wars or Logan's Run. It's a film that's only a little less campy than Flash Gordon, cheesier than Buck Rogers in the 25th century, with a smattering of toned down grindhouse grit around the edges. Almost everybody who speaks in this film is killed, but unusually for a Corman film, there's almost no blood. And there's no nudity.
You know, I thought I did pretty well back there. I mean, you're still in one piece, aren't you?
The film was Corman's biggest grosser at the time, but rather than follow it up with sequels and similar space fare, he elected to keep things cheap and just recycle the effects footage from this film. We never get the animated version, Bottle Beyond the Stars. We never got a sequel starring Ringo Starr called Beetle Beyond the Stars, which is something I really wish we could have seen. Then there are the potential knockoffs of knockoffs where anagrams get drunk with power. Do tablet bean thy rats.
When we conquer Akira and you have some time, you must do something about this.
So, while I dismissed this for a very long time, I've come round to thinking of it as a low-budget effort that really does punch above its weight.
Do you like it? There's no dog in this.
So I don't feel guilty about enjoying this as a silly, fun movie night watch.
Good night, John Boy.
If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.
It's John Boy.